come back into the users list, and then find you now with no role. So this will be fixed in about 10 more seconds, Tom. Yeah, okay, I'm seeing your chats now the first time, I understand. And there we are. Tom saying too, well, there's the old one and there's the new one. I don't know why it sees that. But anyway, this is your issue. And so I'm going to edit you, assign you instance administrator, save, and should be within about 10 seconds, you will have successful logon. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, all good. Thank you for letting me know. Yeah, and you'll have to catch up the labs. I'm not waiting for you for lab time now, yeah? I've stalled a lot on this lab already. So when it's lab time, you just do continue the lab there. Don't even start now. Whatever task. All right. Okay. Okay, welcome back. Yeah, actually, I hope you don't mind if I share that diagram that you just sent, or the image you just sent. But sometimes when you log on, when you get to the SSO portal, it'll provide you with these now links, My Apps Work, Add Section, so you can customize your workspace. But you don't want Beacon, you don't want Customer Support Portal. So at this stage, you could just enter the URL for Cortex One, yeah, or add that as a section so you can see that in your workspace. Yeah, I hope that helps. Yeah. Okay. So any questions about the last lab? The last lab was just making sure you can log in, making sure you can get to the Cortex gateway. Yeah. Here is the Cortex instance in the management console. From the tenant navigator, I can jump to other tenants. I can jump to the Cortex gateway. Yeah. So that's from the tenant navigator. It's getting my available tenants. I have none licensed available for activation. And again, there's a permission management. Maybe when you went to the gateway, you don't see permission management button. I have this. because I have a special XDR role in this instance. So if I click on permission management, I can only do the permission management from the gateway for my company's tenant because I'm the XDR account admin in my tenant. That's the authorization required for a user who needs to perform activation to request that role so I can perform my company's instance activation. Otherwise, it gave me an authorization error. So if you do have questions, please ask. Yeah, you haven't used up your question limit yet. You can ask many more questions. Otherwise, I keep on going, yeah? And what we'll do is we'll talk about Module 3, just to give you an overview of the Management Console, how to get started with the Management Console, how we begin with our agent deployment. So after we have activated our instance, what do we do? So we will go through the options we find in the XDR Management Console. We'll talk about some features that you'll use often, like Quick Launcher, how to use filtering options on a typical Management Console page so you can filter and find the information you need efficiently, how we perform endpoint management. So by the end of this module, you'll be able to identify the different areas of the XDR Management Console, understand how we use Quick Launcher to search for artifacts and console pages, how you manage endpoints from the endpoint all endpoint list, how to create and manage endpoint groups, static endpoint groups with static membership, and dynamic endpoint groups that have dynamic membership. And we will use groups so we can target, when we create a policy, which group of agents will receive that policy. Yeah. We'll learn how to create and download an agent installation package. I've demonstrated that. And how to deploy Cortex XDR Agent to your endpoints. And that's what you'll do in this next lab. We'll actually get XDR Agent installed to your Windows Server VM. So first section we go through is an overview of the XDR Management Console. So a brief review, how do you access the Cortex XDR Management Console? Always the same URL. It's a relative URL. It'll include your subdomain name that you choose during activation, .xdr, .2 letters for the region. Our tenant is in the US, yeah, but Singapore, SG, AU, IN, many others. .paloaltonetworks.com. To authenticate, we're using your customer support portal user credentials, and your SSO session is valid for 8 hours. So if I try to get to Beacon or any other Palo Alto Network service, the hub, that session is valid for 8 hours. And again, by default, you go under dashboards and reports into the dashboards page. And our landing page is the incident management dashboard by default, unless you change it. So what do we find on the left-hand navigation pane in the XDR Management Console? Bitdefender is doing updates. Thank you. Dismiss. So we have the dashboard and report section. I showed you a bit around there. We have our dashboards, the reports, the report templates, and the dashboard manager. So this is our dashboard and reporting interface. We then have incident response, under which we find incidents. Yeah, we can see all the alerts, see all the assets and artifacts involved, and other options under incident response. Yeah, we might need further investigation. We might need response. So the sections under incident response are broken up into incidents themselves. The incidents are our container objects that contain information about our alerts, the assets and the artifacts. Yeah. But besides that, under our incident response, we have options for further investigation. Would we like to use our query builder? Do you want to use the query center to see the queries that have been submitted and their results? Do you want to schedule a query? Do you want to look at your host inventory? We'll go through all of this week, yeah, by Friday. So these are further investigation options. And then we have response options. I actually showed you the action center before, so we could track all the actions that are happening. What were the last actions? Someone did an agent upgrade. Very good. It was me. Yeah. So, someone initiated a live terminal onto this endpoint. Who? We can find out. Scroll across. Did it complete successfully? What does that mean? Who did it? Well done, Carter. Yeah. So here's our action center for response. We can manage different actions. create a new action if we need to from the action center. We'll go through there. We have automation rules new to Cortex XDR. I'll show you later. We have live terminal, another way of initiating live terminal. If you don't want to go through the all endpoint list, and I can see the entries on my EDL. I can add entries to my EDL, a list that will be provided to my Palo Alto Network's next-gen firewalls so they can block access to these IPs or domains. And besides that, we have the incident configuration, and we'll go through all of these as well, yeah, through the week. So that's in our incident response section. And then the next section is detection rules. And when we set the 262 class on Thursday, we will learn how to add your own custom indicators of compromise and why that's beneficial. So that Cortex XDR, if it identifies log activity of access to these files or this domain name or this file by MD5 or SHA-256 hash, XDR can generate for us an IOC alert. We have behavioral indicators of compromise, much more complex types of rules that you can add custom rules. Yeah, and we have many rules built in from Palo Alto Networks so that Cortex XDR, if it sees combinations of different type of activity, all these sources of Palo Alto Networks, different combinations of activity reported by the agent, when it sends its log, it's Cortex XDR that will build for us a BIOC alert based on matches of these rules. We'll learn about correlation rules as well. We have an asset management section where we can look at our asset inventory, where we have information, if we have the Host Insights add-on by Sun, where we have information about our vulnerability assessment, which CVEs are we exposed to on which endpoints, what is the affected product, what's the score of the vulnerability, how many affected endpoints, and then go and take action based on that. And again, we'll go through everything in here by Friday. And the last section is our endpoints area, where we can see our all endpoint list. Yeah, we can manage our endpoint groups. We can create our agent installation packages to download to provide to the desktop admins, the server admins. And this is where we do our policy management, what we spend the most time on in this class, understanding our prevention profiles and policy rules. So they're the different areas we have in the management console, the left-hand navigation pane. And there are going to be pages that you will go into often in the management console. Yeah. So what you can do, if I want to go into all endpoints often, which I do, everywhere you hover your mouse, we give you a star option. So let's add that to my favorite list. Policy management, I'll do that often as well. Add that to my favorite list by clicking on it. If I want to see IOCs in my favorite list for some reason, I'm populating my personal favorite list, not yours. I can reorder my favorites. I can remove my favorites. So just a matter of clicking on the star icon so that the option appears under your favorite. Okay. Other very useful things. This is important. Often, you are going to want to filter your view in many different pages. So, for example, if I jump straight to the alerts table, I want to see all the alerts in the last 7 days. That will be the default filter. Show me all the alerts in the last 7 days from all the different alert sources, not just from XDR Agent. We have many different sources of alerts. You can see, not just from XDR Agent. Here, there's an alert created by Cortex XDR, by its analytics engine, which has its own BIOC rules. Yeah. An XDR IOC alert. An XDR, these are generated by Cortex XDR, not by the agent. Yeah. Maybe I want to filter, just show me the ones that are generated by the agents. So I click on the filter icon, and there are many different alert sources. Just show me the alerts that have been generated by XDR Agent. And then click in the white space somewhere above to apply the filter. And now I'm only going to see those alerts in the last 7 days. And then I want to also add the alerts that have come from alert source XDR Agent if they're a high severity alert. I could choose the filter icon here and click on high, yeah, but I'll do it another way. If I want something in my filter, I'll right click on that value. I'll right click on the value and then show rows with that value. And that adds that to the filter expression. Yeah. So for example, again, if I take pan/student and I show rows with that, that adds another expression, and the username is pan/student. Yeah. And I only want to see the events from 6523 win point. All right, we'll do that another way. I'll click on the icon. Yeah. 6523. I'm now putting in it gave me default operator of contains. We have different operators. And then I'll put in 65, missed it, delete, edit this one, 6523. And then enter on the blue enter arrow, and then click out into the white space. Okay. All right. So I'm just trying to show you how to filter options on any standard page. Maybe I'd like to see severity of high or medium or critical. Yeah. That's clicking on the alert shows me the alert details. That's what I meant to click on. Severity equals high. Here's my whole filter expression. Severity equals high or medium or critical. And click out. And then I'll see all the different types of severity alerts that I've asked for. Yeah, so that's just an example using the alerts table. But if I go into the endpoint list, that's one of my favorites now. Open tab, open in a new tab. And if I go to my endpoints, all endpoints list, again, it's a table view, and we use the same type of filtering criteria. Yeah, I want to see the filters. I can see there's only one filter set based on the endpoint status. Yeah, and to add another filter, just show me the servers, and the endpoint type equals a server. And click out. Now filtered 43 of 189 results. And show me the ones that have an endpoint name of last week. I think I used 65. Yeah. See if they're still connected. They are still connected from last week as well. So it's what I'm trying to show you here is a table view of now the all endpoints and how we filter this list. And again, I can go and edit the endpoint name criteria, add another value, 65, or what are we this week? 67. Add that one in as well. Okay, now we're seeing some 67s and 65s. And we can see here the number 3, because there are 3 filter conditions set. 3 different filter expressions have been set. I can remove this part of the expression. Yeah, remove it. And now I can't see my filters. There are no filters. Yeah, hide the filter expression or display it. If there's only one filter set, yeah, connected or disconnected, we'll see the number 1 on the filter icon. If I want to change the view of my layout, we have the layout manager. Maybe I want to see in the all endpoint list, I'd like to see the endpoint type first as an example. Yeah, it's in position 2. Yeah, I can click on the number here, make that position 1, and it will reorder it for me, not for you. Yeah, I want to see the platform included. It's not included. Platform windows. I want to see a MAC address in a column. I want that MAC address column to be in position number 2. I can drag it and drop it, yeah, into the position I want. Or if I want the agent version, which is enabled, it's in default column number 9 to be locked into the leftmost position. Lock it in. It locks it in. Yeah, lock platform. Next one. Yeah, it's locked into position. And then we have the subdivision. And if you change your layout too much, like I sometimes do, we have the option of restoring the default layout. And this is customized for you, this is now the default layout. All right, so now I'll catch up on some slides. Ask questions anytime, yeah? So I've taken you through the navigation, left-hand navigation pane and how to add favorites by clicking on the star, and then your favorite appears under your favorites. A quick launcher I'll demonstrate to you in a second. At the bottom of the left-hand navigation pane, we have the settings. which is where I showed you the agent audit log. When I need to keep a track of who is doing labs, I watch the management audit log so I can see who is doing what, who's creating which profile, who's creating which policy. I keep track of, what's happening in the lab. And that's very important. License and the Cortex XDR configurations, the global settings. I showed you a bit about the notifications. If I generate a report, for example, you'll get a notification. New BIOC rule content version is available from Palo Alto Networks. To download to your instance, we get notifications, a link to the online documentation, and your logged on user details is where you can find out about your role, what's new, and log out. We also have the tenant navigator in the bottom left. If you click on it, you see your entitled tenants, the tenants that you have access to based on your CSP user and the accounts that you have access. And you can click on one of the tenants to jump to it. And there's the link to the Cortex gateway as well, if you forget the gateway URL. Under settings, configurations, this is where I showed you the integrations. Yeah, that's where you'll go and download the broker VM, configure additional XDR collectors, but this is the general configuration of the Cortex XDR instance. You do your data set management. And here we go in under settings, configurations, and then security settings. And there are some general security settings you should be aware of. You can change the default values, but we do have session expiration. Your user login expiration is valid for 8 hours. You can restrict the allowed management sessions to the management console based on user accounts that are in certain Active Directory domains, approved AD domains, that's disabled by default. You can also restrict based on IP address ranges, also disabled by default, to control access to the management console. Yeah, we also have user expiration. So Tom, some of you might have heard my discussion with Tom recently. Yeah, what happens if I don't log on to your Cortex XDR for a while? Well, based on the setting over here, if we deactivate inactive user, if you don't log in at least once every 30 days, your user will become deactivated. Yeah, the user becomes deactivated, and this is what a deactivated user looks like. You can see they're grayed out. Adrian is still an instance administrator, but we need to go and activate Adrian if Adrian requires access. Yeah. This is an active user, inactive, grayed out. Alan Lee, one of my colleagues, he's account admin in how did you get that, Alan? I'm only instance administrator. He can do permission management for this instance. I can't, my colleague. Yeah, from the Cortex gateway, that is. So this is what a disabled account looks like, how to activate a deactivated, an expired account. And again, these settings are based on the security settings we have, yeah, that you've configured. And that is disabled. Yeah, we are not deactivating inactive users, but you could enable it. Just be careful of that. I showed you a bit around dashboards and reports. I showed you also how we have many predefined dashboards from Palo Alto Networks and the ability to create your own custom dashboard. The reports shows us a list of the reports that are being generated. And the way we generate a report is from a report template. So you create a report template, and then you use the right-click generate, and you'll then find the report in here. I also showed you how you could use the dashboard manager and right-click on a dashboard and save that as a report template to then generate a report. Yeah, so I demonstrated that a bit early. If you'd like to create or edit widgets using SQL, so you can add them to your dashboard, so you can use them in your report templates, this is where we find the SQL widget library. So again, when you log in by default, you're in the incident management dashboard. That's everyone's default dashboard. You can choose alternatives. in the dashboard manager, you can select a different dashboard. If I go into the dashboard manager, I can take a different dashboard, a custom or Palo Alto Networks provider dashboard, right click and set that as my default. Or again, save as a report template, the trick I showed you to then generate reports based on the widgets in that dashboard. And then we'll find our reports in the report list. Yeah, you can output the report. As you saw, I downloaded it as a PDF. Yeah, or you can send it by email or by Slack. So the trick that I showed you, there are two ways for us to create a report. We still need a report template. Yeah. So two ways to create the report. You can run a report template based on a dashboard. From the dashboard manager, we take the dashboard, right click, save as report template, and then give the report template a name so you can generate a report from it. Or you create the report template from beginning. You go into report templates, new template, you follow the 3-step guided process, and then you can generate report from the new template. So here's the report template list, a built-in report template or a custom report template. I right-click, generate report, and then it starts to generate the report. And again, you get the notification when the report is available in the reports list. All of our dashboards and the report templates are populated using SQL widgets, an SQL query, basically. So we have the SQL widget library where we show you all our provided SQL widgets. You can create your own custom ones. So you can add these widgets into your dashboards or report templates. Maybe I'd like to have a dashboard based on a certain set of our XDR agents, just the ones in my data center 1, not the ones in data center 2. Different widgets for different VMs and different data centers. Yeah, different widgets for servers versus workstations versus management machines. Yeah. All right, so that's a little bit around the dashboards and reports area. Now, remember, today is more about understanding, navigating. We get into the guts of how it all works from later today. But we also have in the management console a feature called Quick Launcher. So let me demonstrate Quick Launcher. It's easier for us to talk about than to go through the slides, and then I'll catch up on the slides briefly. This is actually quite a useful incident for me. Within this incident, there's only one alert. Yeah, from one alert source, XDR agent, from one endpoint and one user, but there's also been one wildfire hit. And I have my preference that this tab will be opened on any incident. If I click on the pin, I'm choosing which tab I'd like to open any incident on. I open a different incident, it's now pinned on overview. I open another incident, it's pinned on overview. If I'd like to, again, change my default tab, I'll pin that tab, go back to the first incident, and we find there was one wildfire hit. And then in the key assets and artifacts, I find these two interesting artifacts, one of which is malware test dog. Yeah, I'm just using this so I can copy the hash. I can see there's a wildfire malware verdict. I can even download the wildfire analysis report or view it. How did wildfire performance analysis? What were the results using PE, static analyzer? What were the results using this type of VM with dynamic analysis? What were the results with this VM? Different dynamic analysis. Yeah. And here is the ability to download that wildfire report if you want to and attach it to management, whatever you want. I don't really want that. All I want is the SHA-256. So I'm going to copy the SHA-256 from here. I could have copied it straight from here. Yeah, copied. Yeah, I'm now going to show you Quick Launcher. Here's the icon for Quick Launcher. If your navigation pane is expanded, we always show you Quick Launcher. And I'm going to paste that hash into my Quick Launcher. And straight away, if I press enter, it's now doing a query using Quick Launcher for this artifact. And straight away we see it's a malware verdict. and it's identified as a SHA-256. It's not an IP address. It's a SHA-256. And then it provides us options for further investigation. Do you want to search for all file operations with that hash across your endpoints? Do you want to view the wildfire report? Search for an virus total? Or do you want to perform further actions? Add it to the block list so my agents know if they try to run it, it's going to be blocked straight away. Add as an IOC. Search for it on all endpoints because I have the Host Insights add-on. So this is Quick Launcher. Yeah. I could have learned about this by reading the news, yeah, or some other trusted source. There's new malware in our part of the world. Here's the hash for it. Yeah, I can then go and search for file operations in my environment. Yeah, if I type an IP address, 8.8.8.8, yeah, enter. No, I didn't want to do that. Yeah, and then it's identified that as an IP. And again, options for investigation, options to take actions. www.badsite.com, a domain. That's what we call a domain. Yeah, do you want to add it to the EDL? Do you want to add it as an IOC? One of my on-prem agents. Okay, well, I've got lots of assets that have that IP address. Do you want this win point or that win point? We all have the same IP address, but it's identified as an on-prem asset. Yeah. Do you want options for investigation or actions? And this quick launcher, you can start it by hitting Control-Shift-X. So anywhere I am in the XDR management console, Control-Shift-X brings it back. Yeah. If I move it and I close it with escape, yeah, and then Control-Shift-X later, it brings it back where it was last time. And it's not just host names, IP addresses, hashes, usernames, things like that. If you want to search for, you don't know where to find something in the XDR console pages, assets, and then press enter. I did a / first. Yeah, and then it shows me the different options I could click in the management console. Yeah. So with /, we're doing a search on how to navigate to XDR console pages. Show me endpoint options, all the different endpoint options. I can just click on that to go to that page. So take advantage of Quick Launcher. It's a very useful feature. Helps you for further investigation, sometimes remediation as well. Not sometimes response as well. I shouldn't say remediation. So Quick Launcher is a quick search dialog to let you search for objects and pages in the management console. I demonstrated things like domain. You can do it by file name, a hash, a full path and file name, what we call a file path. It's the full path and file name. Host IP address usernames. The object type is automatically recognized. And as I showed you, it then presents options for further investigation and other actions to take relevant response actions for remediation. Sorry, excuse me, everyone. Okay, so I showed you the 3 different methods of opening up Quick Launcher, or a couple anyway. I didn't show you the third, to tell you the truth. If you're doing PCDRA, they can ask you, yeah, what are the different ways of opening Quick Launcher? So we have the left-hand icon and the left navigation pane. Yeah, we have our keyboard shortcut, Control-Shift-X. Not too bad to remember if you know Cisco shortcuts. Yeah. And from the shortcut menu of some objects, if I find an endpoint and I right-click on the endpoint, I can then open in Quick Launcher. I didn't show you that one, yeah? To close our Quick Launcher, we press Escape. And to change the position, just drag and drop it. The last position is retained across your session, different sessions. Here's an example of searching based on one of our host names, the investigate, and other actions for response. It's identified as an on-prem asset. Yeah, this host name. He's using Quick Launcher to search for an IP address. This happens to be an on-prem IP address that's found an on-prem asset. And then again, investigate options, it won't allow us to add this IP address to the EDL, so that our firewalls will block it because it's one of our on-prem assets. Yeah, it won't get, this is grayed out. It's grayed out. It's internal. It's grayed out. It's one of our XDR agents. Here is using Quick Launcher to input an MD5 or SHA-256 hash so we can get the verdict from Wildfire. It's malware. Wildfire knows it's malware. And what do you want to do now that you know it's malware? Do you want to perform further investigation, search in the logs that we have in XDR for any log activity from our pro agents of file operations with that hash? File creates, file deletes, file opens, things like that. Or do you want to search for process executions of running a process with that hash? Yeah. Or do you want to add it to the block list or the allow list? We'll get through all of that too. What does that mean? Yeah, what does adding to the allow list mean? What does it really do? We'll get there. Here's a search based on domain name / username Thomas. Yeah, Thomas, I don't think this is your domain name, but anyway. And investigate options. We can launch the user view. We have different types of advanced views in XDR: IP view, an asset view, a user view, a hash view, many different advanced views. So we can then maybe even search for all login events with that user. Yeah. Here's our go-to mode. If I don't know where to find a console page, you first hit the / and then you type in what you're looking for. Asset. So that puts you into go-to mode. The / puts you into go-to mode, and then you start typing what you want to go to, click on the option. So you can see why I demonstrated that first, so I can get through those slides and you can understand what that all means, yeah? Now, here we are in the all endpoint list. And what we're trying to show you is to understand in any table view we show you, again, it could be all endpoints, could be my alerts table, could be the query table, yeah, my list of dashboards in the dashboard manager. But we show you a table view of what you're looking for. And sometimes the filter that you're using, the default filter, is not what you want to use to quickly find the information you need. So we have our filter builder. You can keep on adding to the expression manually. If you want to delete your filter expression, there's the garbage can. If you want to save a complex filter expression, that's why we have a floppy disk. So you can save it and then load that filter very quickly. Yeah. Here we see the filter icon, the filter display is enabled, and there's one filter set. And the filter set is based on the endpoint status. You can see this is colored in black, yeah? So that shows one filter condition based on endpoint status, no other conditions. If we also have the filter based on endpoint name, then we'll see this is dark as well. On the all endpoint list, I can right click on an endpoint. I also have what we call the initiate row. If you hover over an object, you see additional options to click on it. Do you want to isolate the endpoint, perform live terminal, for example? And the other thing that's important, and you'll probably notice this at some stage, when you single click, for example, an endpoint, if I select just one endpoint, or don't even click it, I just right click on one endpoint, I'll then find there are three options here: endpoint control, security operations, and endpoint data. If I select more than one endpoint, two or more, and then I right click, notice the options are slightly different. I don't see endpoint data anymore. Endpoint data requires that I query the endpoint to get information from it. Yeah, so I can still perform security operations on multiple, still perform endpoint control on multiple, but I don't have the options available under endpoint data unless we only select a single endpoint. Yeah. Okay. Filtering, because you will use filtering a lot. Here we have the all endpoint list. And we're changing our filter to include different endpoint types: mobile, server, workstation, Kubernetes nodes. Again, you can save a filter if you want to. Here's the result. Again, the bold icon shows that endpoint type is one of the conditions that is set in the filter. Yeah. You can refresh as well whenever you like, and you can see there's only one filter expression set. All right, let me show you that a bit more. So if I go back to my, let's go back to the endpoint list. All right, let's say I'd like to do a filter based on our endpoint names, and our endpoint names are all going to start with 6, 7, yeah? So I'm going to do a filter. If it's connected or disconnected, that's the default. But if the endpoint name contains a value of 6, 7, that should match all of us. I could say 6, 7, 1s. Yeah, but then it's going to miss Jack and Sammy and Thomas. So I'll say also include 6, 7, 0s. Yeah, so it can be quite specific. Yeah, and then click out. And then here are the endpoint names. A couple of people have started doing labs fast. That's okay, but you're all going to get a chance to do this lab soon. There's mine and there's 2 others. So if I want to save that as a filter, I'll click my floppy disk and save that filter as Jerry December EPT, or something like that. And I'll share this in case you'd like to use this filter as well. Yeah. And I'll remember to delete it afterwards. I'll save that. So now if I don't have that filter set, I'll revert or delete with a trash can. Whenever I want my filter quickly, I click on the layout manager, which is where I have my filters saved. And there's one of my filters. I click on it, it applies that filter. Yeah. There's my filter that I made public, right? So you can see it as well. Yeah. And again, I don't want to see the expression for my filter. Hide it. I do want to see it. Display it. I want to see my layout manager and change my layout. You can change the layout as I showed you as well. There are many columns not displayed by default. Yeah, many things to scroll across and see more details about the endpoints in this case. Maybe you want to see the install dates, yeah? All right, so that takes you through the layout manager and the filters area. You get there with a 3-dot ellipsis, the 3 dots here. Again, with the layout manager, and if you're in the layout manager, you can drag and drop to reorder the columns. If it is enabled, you'll see it. You have to make sure it's enabled with a tick. You can stretch the columns, compress the columns, stretch them back out again. Yeah, adjust the column width. I showed you can drag and drop or change the number. All right, so here we have our endpoint, all endpoints list. We're going to have endpoint name first in column number 1, endpoint 2, endpoint type in 2, endpoint status number 3. Yeah. So that's how to get there with a 3-dot and the layout manager. And like I do in class, I do so many demonstrations. I use the option to restore the default layout so everything goes back to the defaults. Otherwise, you wouldn't trust using these options. You wouldn't want to play with them too much. So that's very useful, I find. All right, the last part before you have lab time plus break time, whatever order you like. Yeah, we have now got to understand how we get the agent onto our endpoints, how we install Cortex XDR agent. So first of all, in our all endpoints list, we see our endpoints. And what is the definition of a managed endpoint? It's any system with our Cortex XDR agent installed. You know where to find it under endpoints, all endpoints. Make that a favorite. You'll need it. And the table shows you by default all connected and disconnected endpoints. So you can change the filter criteria if you need. If you click on an endpoint, we then have the side pane appear, which then shows you details about the endpoint. You can scroll down, open the sections that are collapsed to see the agent details, the network details, MAC address, IP address and mask, gateway, the policy details. So this is by clicking on one of the endpoints. And now I can collapse the endpoint details and then look at another section. So we have a scroll bar on the right as well. There are many options when you right-click an endpoint. I won't take you through all of them, but if you do ever want to force an endpoint to perform a check-in and you're not on the endpoint, from Cortex XDR Endpoint Control, perform a heartbeat. That forces XDR to initiate a heartbeat to the agent. I can upgrade the agent. I didn't show you that. By the way, in this lab, they're going to ask you to install or create an agent installation package using version 7.9. 7.9 is not available, so you will use one of the 8.2 releases. And I did not use the latest 8.2 release. I didn't use the latest one. This is the second, this is -1. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is right click. Oh, I did upgrade it before. I showed you. I can't upgrade it. There's nothing to upgrade it to. Yeah. I can't upgrade it. There's no newer agent version for it. Yeah. I showed you the upgrade before, right? So that's why I'm on the latest. If you want to do your own upgrade, don't choose the latest version. Choose one before in the next lab. Yeah. If I right click on my endpoint, perform a check-in. Yeah. All right. And if we looked at the endpoint, it'll do a check-in in a few seconds. Right-click, endpoint control. I can retrieve the support file to attach it to a customer support portal case. Get the host firewall logs if we had the host firewall extension. Yeah, many options. Uninstall the agent. Yeah. Security operations are to perform endpoint isolation, a live terminal, initiate a malware scan. Don't do this on your VM. It'll scan the whole endpoint and it'll change the way some of our labs will work. It'll find your malware before we're meant to find your malware. So please don't do this until the end of the week if you want to do it. Retrieve files from the endpoint. And then there's endpoint data. I can view the incidents that endpoint has alerts in. I want to see all of the incidents with alerts from this endpoint. Or I want to understand which set of profiles is being used by my agent. It's using the default agent settings profile, not the one I created last week. It's using the default malware profile, and here are the settings in the default malware profile. Yes, we are performing Office file with macro examination by default. Yes, we examine and prevent malicious executables and DLLs from running by default. I'm using all the default profiles. I can see that because I've used the endpoint data option. Yeah. View that which exploit profile am I using default. I can check their settings. So that's on the right click endpoint data. Often when you're troubleshooting, does the agent have the right policy? Let's view which policy does it have. What's the setting within the policy? So different right click options on the endpoint. And we don't get endpoint data if you've selected more than one endpoint. The last part of this module before your break and lab time, yeah? When we want to target which XDR agent policy will be applied to my agent, we'll do that by group name, by group membership normally. Can use many conditions, but a group name is a very simple way of doing it. And so we have two different types of endpoint groups you can create in Cortex XDR. You can create a static group, and it's static because you manually select the group members. Server 1, server 2, server 3, that's it. It's static membership until you update the static endpoint group membership. Or you can create a dynamic endpoint group, and dynamic will be based on criteria. Is it going to be a Windows 2016 server? Yeah. Any XDR agent with that operating system would become a member of that dynamic group. So let me demonstrate that, yeah? It'll make a bit more sense if I demonstrate. And you're about to do this in your lab as well. So we also manage the endpoint groups under endpoints. I'll open that in a new tab, endpoint groups. And they'll ask you to create two different groups in your lab. Yeah, we have no groups by default. I'll create one called 6718-static group. And with a static group, you define the membership statically. Yeah, I don't want to search through this entire list of 189 results. So again, I'll just use my filter conditions based on the endpoint name. If the endpoint name contains a 67, let's have a look to start with. All right, and there's my endpoint. I'm going to click it. Now watch what happens here. If I don't click anything, it gives us an option to create a dynamic group purely based on conditions. Purely based on conditions. If I do tick one or more, that changes to you're creating a static group now. You have manually specified the members. Yeah, you have manually specified the membership. Because you manually ticked, you now only get the option to create a static group. So now I'm creating a static group. Yeah, and there's my static group, the filter condition that is used for it. Yeah, and sorry, I shouldn't, but anyway, the two endpoints that were statically defined, and we'll see there are two members. Yeah. Now I'll add a dynamic one. This will be my dynamic group, 01. I almost got group. And now for dynamic membership, notice how we have the create dynamic group button by default, but it stays there only if we don't tick. Yeah. So now I'll do conditions. If the endpoint type is a server, show rows with server. That's too broad. I've now found 184 out of 189 results that are would now be dynamic members. And the operating system is Windows 2012 R2. Now it's filtered it further. And the agent version, yeah, is an 8.2 or contains an 8.2.0.46. It's further refined the conditions. Yeah. And if I don't tick, I'm then creating a dynamic group based on these conditions. If we install an agent on another server with this operating system and this agent version, it would dynamically appear as the 14th member of this dynamic group. Yeah, it's dynamic membership. If I upgrade the agent version to a new version, all of these would no longer be in this group because the condition is based on this agent version. Yeah, so I'll create, just as an example, I'll create that as a dynamic group. And with that filter, if I scroll across, we'll see, there are actually 13 members. And then I can even view the endpoints, which endpoints are members of that group. Here it's done a search for that endpoint, that group. And there are the members of my dynamic group. So endpoint groups, again, are used so you can target policy against the group of XDR agents that are member of the group. You can use many different conditions with dynamic group membership. Yeah, IP address ranges. Again, data center 1 versus data center 2 or whatever it is. So here we have an example of creating a new group. You must define a group name. Use your filter condition to see the available list. And then you select the endpoint for a static group. Or if you're happy with your filter condition and you want a dynamic group, you just create dynamic group. You lose this option if you've ticked. It turns into create static group if you tick. All right, very last part, last few slides, endpoint management. How do I get the agent onto my workstations, onto my servers, onto my virtual machines? So I've already demonstrated this. I won't overdo it. With a brand new Cortex XDR, there are no agent installation packages. You must create one at least for every platform. One for Windows, one for Mac OS, one for Linux, let's say. You create the agent installation package for your platform. You then download the package to the endpoint, and then you run the installer to install the agent. I demonstrated installation to a single endpoint by downloading the package and running it using the GUI installation. I just found the installer MSI. You could do that for Mac OS as well. We also have non-GUI installation. Yeah, you can use MSI exec to do a command line silent installation. Most likely, when an organization deploys Cortex XDR the first time, they want to install it to multiple endpoints. I've got 5,000 agents or 5,000 endpoints. I need to install on 5,000 endpoints my agent so it can use a software distribution tool. For Windows, we're talking about SCCM, not MM, group policy. For Mac OS, you can use Jamf. For Linux, you can use Satellite, Chef, Helm, and other distribution methods. And when you create agent installation package for Android or iOS, we automatically upload the agent installation package to the Google Play Store. Your XDR instance uploads the package to the Google Play Store or Apple Play Store and provides you with the URL that you give to the user to click on that URL from their iPad, from their Android phone, to then download and install the agent on their device. So here's an example of going under the endpoint area. We use agent installation and the option to create a new agent installation package. So give it a name. The default platform is Windows. Choose the package type and choose the version of the XDR agent. You'll see all the available supported versions from the version list. When you do this lab, it'll ask you to find version 7.9. It is not available in the list. It has been discontinued. Yeah. So if you see in your endpoint list, this kind of indicator, yeah, this one's outdated. On December 19th, it will reach end of life and will no longer receive content updates and bug fixes. Yeah, when you have this yellow. Whereas this one, it has already reached end of life. It is not receiving content updates and bug fixes. It's still providing protection to the Windows 10 workstation if it was connected, but it doesn't get any more updates and bug fixes. So it is a responsibility to make sure that we update to a current, these are good ones. Yeah, it doesn't have an icon next to it. Yeah, 8.2, good ones. So we choose the version that you want. If you want to install or use the Kubernetes installer to install to a Kubernetes cluster, you use the option when you're creating the agent installation that package type is not Windows, but Kubernetes installer. Different name, select the version of the agent, select the agent's daemon set namespace that it will use, and choose whether this agent will run on the master node in the Kubernetes cluster or on all nodes in the Kubernetes cluster. There is also a Helm installer. And once we have the agent installation package ready, yeah, you will then be able to, let's say you have to provide this to your Windows admins, to the work server admins and whoever manages the workstations as well. We would right click, give them the 64-bit installer or the 32-bit if you still use 32-bit. We have the option of downloading just the installer MSI. Or you can download a zip file that has the installer and the latest content update. Yeah. At the time that you do the download here, it will have the latest content update as part of it. If this is just the installer, like what I did, when the agent registers to Cortex XDR, it will have to do a content update. Yeah, a larger one than an agent install with this option. That's the easier option, works fine, but please do understand this does bundle the latest content update in the zip file. Excuse me for sniffling. All right, so that's module 3. At the end of the module, you know how to get around the management console. You know how to use our quick launcher, Control-Shift-X, or the icon on the left. You know how to manage endpoints in the all endpoint list, how to create static and dynamic endpoint groups, how to create and download the agent installation package, and how to deploy XDR agent to your endpoints. I demoed some of that earlier, but important for you to see already what the agent looks like and for me to do some management. So if you have questions, you are welcome to ask questions. Otherwise, this is very much workshop style, a short presentation, and then you do your hands-on to get some experience. Yeah, if you're still doing activity 2, keep on going. It won't take you long. And then catch up on these 2 activities. The first one will ask you to deploy Cortex XDR agent. In 3.1, you will need to log in from the VM to our XDR instance so you can download the XDR agent install package to your VM. And then you'll create static and dynamic endpoint groups. Let me know if you need help. If you want to go for a short break, that's fine. Yeah, go for a 5 or 10 minute break. Start the lab. Yeah, I'll probably give you about till the top of the hour, till 4 o'clock, till if you till 4 p.m. Singapore time, yeah, to enjoy your break and to perform these lab activities. At 4 p.m., we will begin module 4. Sound good? Got any questions? You getting to know your way around already? Yeah, much more than Monday morning. Yeah, that's already now a few hours into it. So you're starting to feel, well, Tom, you're saying no, not all good. That's what's the no? Okay, so I'll leave you to it. Again, take a short break if you want, and then get stuck into it. Call me when you need help. Otherwise, I go quiet. All right, thank you. Okay. Also, in this lab, they'll ask you to use SciTool to interact with the XDR agent once it's installed. And very important that you don't lock yourself out using SciTool anyway, because we're using a different password that's not the same one in the lab guides. Yeah, so I'm now going to send through in the chat what the correct XDR agent password, the supervisor password is. So when you get that to that step, you don't have problems. Yep, so I'm sending that through in the chat to everyone now. Yeah, that's the correct password for the XDR agent uninstall password. All right. If you need anything else from me, you let me know. Otherwise, I'll hear from you. Yeah. I'll see you again at 4 p.m. Okay, everyone, great progress in the lab. I can see there are many Cortex XDR agents installed. Great work. Yeah, so I've found the all endpoint list with a filter based on our endpoint names containing 671 or 670. Last time I looked, we had 10. That includes me. And now we're seeing 11. Great. So me plus 10 of you. Fantastic. Yeah, so if anyone else needs help, call out. Even if you're a bit behind, that's fine. But we will start the next module, yeah, in 4 minutes. The last module for the day. Okay. Okay. So any questions for the last lab? In the last lab, you created an agent installation package in the XDR Management Console. You downloaded it and installed it to your Windows 2012 server VM. You also created a static and dynamic endpoint group. And we'll look at how to use those groups in this module, because what we're going to learn in this module is how we have different profiles to provide configuration of the agent. And we have policy rules to choose which profiles to apply. So we're going to learn how to create settings for specific groups of endpoints, the groups that you just created. We'll understand the relationship between profiles and policy rules. In this module, we learn about the agent settings profile and how to configure the settings in it, how to then build a Windows policy rule to attach that agent settings profile and make sure your agent is using your agent settings. We'll then learn how to configure a restrictions profile to configure or enforce additional restrictions on the agent, and then attach that restrictions profile to your same policy rule. So the next time your agent does a check-in, it will be able to enforce additional restrictions. So it's a short module, but I want to give you good demonstrations too. But by the end of the module, you'll be able to create and manage the different profile types, how to add a new profile for Windows or Mac OS or Linux. You'll know how to create and manage policy rules and understand the rule hierarchy, the rule logic. You'll be able to create and configure the agent settings profile, attach it to a Windows policy rule, and create and configure a restrictions profile and attach it also to your Windows policy rule. And tomorrow we'll learn about malware profile, exploit profile, and the exceptions profile as well. So there are 5 profiles that we apply to our agent to configure its behavior. So what is a prevention profile to start off with? In our endpoint management section, we have the policy management, and we have our prevention profiles and prevention policy rules. A policy rule chooses which profiles shall we apply to our targeted endpoints. Yeah. So we do all of this under endpoints, policy management, and we'll learn about global exceptions. Exceptions to disable some of our XDR agent protections that will be applied globally to all of my agents. We'll learn about how to disable protections, configure exceptions in an exceptions profile also, so we can target those exceptions to a set of endpoints, not make them global. But this is where we configure our prevention profiles and the prevention policy rules, as I showed you. So we really have, under policy management, this will make more sense now. When we configure prevention profiles, we're dealing with things like agent settings, restrictions profiles, the malware and exploit prevention profiles, yeah, to attach to a policy rule. So we call them prevention profiles and prevention policy rules. This morning, we also touched on the idea that we also support extensions for our XDR agent for Windows. We have the host firewall extension. We have the disk encryption extension and another, and we would attach those in an extension policy rule to target the set of endpoints that need those extensions. So we don't look at this part in the class. This is what we spend time on. It's the prevention and deployment course. Down here in settings, we have the ability to add, if you've disabled USB device attachments, which we'll look at how to do, what if there is a requirement to authorize a custom USB connected device? So in the bank or whatever it is, they might need to have a USB security key attached. So we can also, through our device management options, add a custom USB device class. So the types of prevention profiles that we have for Windows, Mac OS, and Linux, there are different settings in each, but we have these 5 profile types for Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. The agent settings profile, so it can set the log space used by the agent, enable the Pro license feature to turn on the enhanced endpoint data monitoring and collection. Or if I don't want to use the global uninstall password, yeah, I can override it on an agent settings profile. We have an exceptions profile, so I can disable some of our protections for a process, maybe to address a compatibility or a false positive issue. The process no longer starts properly after installing XDR agent. We've identified which of our protections is interfering with the process. we can disable a protection module for a process if you needed to. We'll learn how to do that tomorrow. We have our exploit profile, and we have by default exploit protection, but we can tune the way it works with an exploit profile. Designed, what's exploit prevention for? To block system flaws in browsers, known vulnerabilities in our applications, and our operating system, like exploit kits. We have a malware profile to control the way our malware protection works. It's turned on by default, but maybe you're in an environment where you don't want to upload unknown files to Wildfire. Yeah, we can disable that for the customer. All right, you don't want to upload unknown files to Wildfire? We won't. Yeah. Or we do not auto-quarantine a file with a malware verdict. Maybe we want to automatically quarantine the file. So we do that in a malware profile. And we have the restrictions profile to enforce additional restrictions. Block attempts to run an executable from a USB drive, from the temp directory, from the downloads directory. And again, the different settings for each platform. Yeah, but still we have the same 5 profile types. So on a brand new Cortex XDR instance, if this is your first time log on to Cortex XDR, and we go into the prevention profiles, and we look at the prevention profiles for Windows, Mac OS, Linux, they're all listed down there. All we will have is we'll have a default profile of each type for each platform. We haven't created our own custom profiles. Yeah. So there's a default agent settings profile for Windows. In fact, let's look at how that would look on a brand new Cortex XDR. If we go into our prevention profiles, so policy management, and we'll find prevention profiles. Here we have lots created by students, yeah? So what would it look like on a brand new Cortex XDR? We'll do a filter based on profiles that have the name default. Just show me all the ones that have the name default. And there's another one called default, no exceptions. And this is what a new, it wouldn't have this details, associated targets, but we'd see a default exploit profile, default malware profile, default restrictions profile for Windows, a default agent settings profile, and a default exceptions profile that has no exceptions. We don't disable any protections. And the same thing for Mac OS, a default profile of each type. And for Linux, a default profile for each type. You get the idea. Also, in a brand new Cortex XDR, we have default policy rules. We don't have 264 policy rules for Windows. There's only one. And the rule name is default, Windows default. So if the rule name contains default, please show it to us in the list. Forget about these 4. Forget about these 4. Yeah, they shouldn't be there. Yeah. So this is what it would look like. For platform Windows, we have one policy rule on a new Cortex XDR called Windows Default that targets any endpoint and applies all the default profile. The purpose of a policy rule is to choose which set of profiles will be applied if we match that policy rule. If the platform is Windows, we have the Mac OS default, Mac OS, I'm sorry. We have the Mac OS default named rule targeting any Mac OS agent and applying all of the default Mac OS profiles. Yeah, same thing for Linux, Android, and iOS. Yeah, and you can't delete these default rules. I can't delete the default rule. I can clone it. I can change it, but I can't delete it. Yeah, so I can use the default policy rules if you want to. Maybe I'd like to all my agents, the ones using my default policy rule, to use a different agent settings profile. I can change that, but I can't delete this rule, and it will always be at the bottom of the rule base. It'll always be at the bottom, the default rules. Yeah. So being used in a lab many times, for Windows, we have 264 policy rules from rule number 1 down to the last rule, Windows default. And every time our agents check in, if the platform is Windows for the XDR agent, XDR evaluates rule number 1. Does it meet this targeting criteria? If it does, we'll apply these profiles. If we don't match rule number 1, we go down to rule 2. Nope, the endpoint name doesn't contain that. We go down to rule 3. Nope, that's not the endpoint name. We go down to rule 4. And as soon as there's a match, Cortex XDR identifies which set of profiles must be applied to the agent and applies them or any changes to those profiles. Yeah. All right, so that's my brief introduction. I'll catch up on some slides. I hope that helps though, yeah? So for each platform, we have a default profile of every type. And that's what is applied by default if you don't match a rule above. You land on the Windows default rule, which gets all of these default profiles. Yeah. So if you want to create a new profile, go into the prevention profile page, use the option to add a new profile. You choose the platform. There is now iOS. Yeah, so this is an older slide, but we have 5 platforms now, including iOS, Apple's. Yeah, so we choose the platform, then you choose the type of profile, and then you click next, and then it asks you to configure the profile settings with at least a profile name, and you can accept the defaults for everything else. There are default settings for everything else, not the name. If you need to work for multiple customers and you want to export a profile from one Cortex XDR, you can then import from file into another Cortex XDR. Yeah, so if you've done a lot of work customizing profiles, export and import. Again, that would be between different tenants. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel, yeah? So maybe you do the templates in your company tenant, and then you export and import into customer 1, import into customer 2. All right. So now let's understand the relationship between those profiles and policy rules. Please do ask questions. Yeah, if I'm going too quickly or you're not understanding, you'd like me to explain it a different way, please do ask. But this is easier to see. We're now in the prevention policy rules. And as I showed you, for each platform, there is only one rule on new Cortex XDR. That platform's default, which targets any XDR agent for that platform and applies the default profiles. Yeah. So you have the ability to add your own rules. And when you add a rule, it consists of a name. You choose the list of profiles to attach or to apply to the agent, and what will be the targeted endpoints. You can use different criteria, endpoint name, group membership, many others. But the important thing to understand, everyone, is when Cortex XDR agent does a check-in, if it's platform Windows, XDR will evaluate rule 1. And if there's a match, apply those profiles. If we don't match rule 1, like a firewall, we'll go down to rule 2. Is there a match? No, there isn't. We'll go down to rule 3. Endpoint's no longer available in the system. Yeah. Eventually, when there's a match, as soon as there's a match, first match, we apply those set of profiles or any changes to those profiles. So the evaluation starts from the top. Sometimes your rule order has to be configured to get your endpoint to match correctly, to get the right set of profiles. Depends on the kind of conditions you use. So we have, again, for each platform in our prevention policy rules, there's only one rule for Windows, one rule for Mac OS. Yeah, Windows default, which targets that's any Cortex XDR agent. Yeah, any that we don't match on a higher order rule, that will be matched on. And again, we apply the default set of profiles. You can change, you can edit this, apply different profiles if you want, but you can't delete these default rules. You can't reorder. It's always down the bottom, always targets any endpoint. Yeah, so what are we using? Yeah, wrong browser. What are we using now? Yeah, you've all just installed XDR agent. If I take one of our endpoints, I better make sure it's not Kent's, I think, because Kent's gone a bit ahead, but I'll take an endpoint kind of randomly, and I'll then click on it to see its details and scroll down to the agent details. No, I don't want to see that. I'll minimize that. The network details, I'll minimize that too. And then see the policy. Which policy does 6714 endpoint use? It's using the Windows default policy rule and the Windows default extension policy, by the way. Yeah, to actually see which set of profiles is applied without me looking at the policy, I can say endpoint data, view the endpoint policy. And then I see which profiles are applied, the default agent settings profile, the default malware profile, and the others, and how they've been configured I can look at as well. Yeah. So we have default out-of-the-box policy per platform. Yeah, any targets any agent. and we apply the default set of profiles. So if you want to create your own profile, if you want to create your own policy rule after you configured your own profiles, you use the option to add new policy. You go through a 3-step karaoke process. In step 1, we have at least must choose the policy name, and it will try to, for platform Windows, we chose a policy for platform Windows, give a good description. Is this for the workstations or the VM, the servers in the data center one, or whatever it is? Give a good description. And then you choose which profiles will be applied, from the drop downs. That's the purpose of the policy. Which profiles we apply to the targeted endpoints. So that's in step number 1, the general step. We then hit next, we target it. We then look at the summary, and then we get to reorder the rule before we save it. So I'll demonstrate all of that. So the 2 profiles we learn about in this module and that you get to play with for the lab are the agent settings profile, and we'll then talk about restrictions profile. So let me give you a bit of a demonstration first. I like to, so that way I can catch up on slides briefly. So I don't want my endpoint, which is also using the default agent settings. I want to change some of its agent settings. So I'm going to add my own agent settings profile. Going into policy management, prevention profiles. I've got a filter just looking at these profile names. So bear that, I'll just revert that. And then I'm going to add a new profile by creating a new one. For platform Windows, it will be an agent settings profile. And then hit next. And then here are the settings I can configure in my agent settings profile. And it's a very long form on this page, I'll configure just quickly the name, 6718 for me, my agent profile 01, give it a good name, give it a good description. And then just before I go through the options in here, most of them, we can scroll through the form, scroll down. It's a long form. So if I know I just want to jump to XDR Pro endpoint section, I click on that because by default, XDR Pro license is disabled. I'm not using the Pro license, we're just using the Prevent license. If I want to jump back up to change the name, I'll click on General Information. If I want to change the user interface settings quickly, instead of scrolling, I can navigate in the left-hand section. So under General Information, we have the name, a description. We then have the disk space setting for the XDR agent log maximum. This log limit is also the limit of, if we've already got to 5,000 meg worth of quota, we cannot quarantine any new files either. So quarantining also uses this quota. I'll mention that again when we talk about malware protection. By default, the user interface, our tray icon is visible. Maybe I want to hide it from the user. It's now going to be hidden. The XDR agent console, I don't want them to even be able to access it. Use default is enabled, so make that disabled, for example. And do we want to provide XDR agent notifications when we do a live terminal? By default, we'll notify the user. They'll get a pop-up on the bottom right. Maybe we need to request end user permission. Maybe we don't want to give them any notification when we perform live terminal. Straight away it establishes with no notification. So these are settings we can configure in the agent settings profile. If I want to override the global uninstall password, I can control that from here. If I want to configure my Pro license, enable my Pro license, I need to enable it from here. If I want to configure my agent auto upgrade, which is disabled by default, we can configure the agent to perform enable auto upgrade, as we talked about before. And by default, it'll use the latest agent version. And by default, it'll perform that rollout immediately. I can say, no, don't do that immediately. Do it delayed after 7 days, after the agent has been released for 7 days. Upgrade my critical environment versions only within critical environment lines. Some of you did install the CE agent for critical environments. For like manufacturing and process control. And they have, they're not the normal agents, those critical environment agents. And so this is where you configure your agent settings profile. I'll save my profile. For some reason, I can't. It won't let me create it. There's something wrong with the name. I don't know why it won't let me. XDR Pro. So I'm going to, something wrong in there. We saw the red dot. So I'm actually going to disable XDR Pro. We will learn about it on Thursday in the 262 class, and you'll get to use it on Thursday. So I'll create my agent settings profile, which will hide my tray icon. Yeah. I didn't show you the agent security settings. I'll talk about those as well through the slides. But that profile will sit there doing nothing. It's in the list, but it won't be applied to my agent until I configure a Windows policy rule that is attaching that profile and targeting my agent. So briefly, I'll create a new prevention policy rule for platform Windows. And then I'll catch up on some slides. So this is going to be my Windows Rule 01. And what is the purpose of a policy rule? Well, we choose a platform, give it a good, again, description, and you choose which set of profiles will be applied. Sometimes the 671, close enough. 6715, 6718. That's why I'm 6718, not 6719. I get confused with different course runs, yeah? So here's my Windows policy rule name, and I've chosen to apply the default profiles for everything except the agent settings profile. In step number 1, we'll then target it. I can use many different targeting criteria, yeah? But we all created endpoint groups. So I'm going to do mine based on my static group. Yeah, my static group starts with 6718 as well. So that's the only criteria, but I could add more. I can add many other conditions if you want to, yeah? Or don't have to do it based on group name, yeah? And then that's the targeting. Step 3, click next. Here's the summary. That's your policy name for platform Windows. The set of profiles we will apply. Yes, that's my agent settings profile. And based on my filter, I've selected 2 endpoints. Just to show you, I could have selected, I had 2 members in my static group. You'll only have 1. And then it's not yet saved. It's now at the top of the rule base. I get the choice. Do I need to reorder it? I don't need to in the lab. You won't need to in the lab either. Yeah, because we're all doing it based on our own group name. Yeah, but I get the chance to reorder it and then save. And only then is it actually saved to Cortex XDR. So next time my agent does a check-in, it will receive that agent settings profile. Yeah. So now let me catch up on some slides while that's saving off. Sometimes in the lab, by the way, if 2 people are doing this save at the same time, one of you will get an error, yeah, saying, sorry, there's already a save in process, and you have to build the rule again, unfortunately. Yeah, it doesn't let you just save again. You have to build the rule again. Anyway, next time my agent does a check-in, I'll show you it gets the agent settings profile. I'll prove that. In the meanwhile, what is an agent settings profile? Different settings for Linux versus the other platforms and Windows. Yeah. With Windows, I can register the Cortex XDR agent with Windows Security Center integration. So we register it as our AV product. That's not an option for Linux or Mac OS. So there are different options. Yeah. There's no uninstall password for Linux, whereas we have uninstall password for Windows, for example. So the agent settings is to configure the agent's behavior. Yeah, the agent settings to limit the disk space used by logging and quarantining by the agent, to configure the user interface behavior. We enforce agent security to protect the agent, to protect our file system installation, our registry, our services, and other. We have agent security turned on by default. We can override the global uninstall password, enable Pro, configure automatic upgrades, configure my agents to use a broker VM as their proxy to Cortex XDR, which we'll learn about on Wednesday. Yeah, so many different options in the agent settings profile for Windows, to summarize. And one of the sections is agent security. Do we want to configure agent security options that prevent unauthorized access or tampering with the XDR agent components? And use default is enabled. So we are enabled for all the protections by default. Yeah, we are automatically enabled by default. But if you wanted to disable some of our protections, yeah, if you disable our XDR agent tampering protection, everything is disabled. Yeah. If you disable this part over here, Or you could specifically say I'm disabling service protection so I can stop and start the services as a user. Yeah, it's not recommended you should do that at all. It's very important that we have our agent security settings enforced. Yeah, in our lab environment, they'll get you to do some testing because we want to show you around the Cortex XDR agent. So they'll get us to disable in the agent settings profile, they'll get us to disable the file system protection just to test so we can dig around through some of the hidden directories. Yeah, so they'll get you to go down to the agent security. And what I was trying to say there is by default, we have all of these different types of protections enabled. By default, you can see use default enable, the file system protection, the registry protection. What if I say over here, XDR agent tampering protection disable? Well, then all of those protections are disabled. So that's not good at all. If I have them enabled over here, I could still say, you know what, let's disable our file protection. You still don't want to do that. We're doing it in the lab for some testing. Yeah, I think they also get you to disable the service protection so we can stop and start the services from the services application on Windows. So not normally do that kind of thing, yeah? Just in our lab. By the way, while I'm here, my agent has a connection error. Goodness. Sometimes that happens, just reconnect. Oh, login time limits have been exceeded for me. So I need to relog myself back in. That might happen to you as well. Number 18, same password as the rest of you. What I'll do tomorrow is I'll send you a copy of that file in the chat, and that way you can save the file and copy and paste from the file. Yeah. So, oh goodness. I don't know what happened to my server, right? Now I'm quite concerned. So now I'm going back to the endpoint list. I'm going to verify its connection status. Is it still connected to the internet or is it shut down or something like that? Yeah, a bit of troubleshooting, a bit early, but anyway, we're still connected. Could I live terminal? Let's try. If I hover over here in the initiate row, can I live terminal to it? Is it still actually running? Maybe it was just a remote desktop service. Yeah. So I'm trying to establish a live terminal session to it. I can initiate that WebSocket connection. So I know it's still running. Yeah. Very strange. Definitely still running. And if I do a view of the endpoint policy, we will see that it is now using my agent settings profile. And I did not break it by changing the agent security settings. I didn't break it at all. Yeah. That shouldn't have disabled my connection to the remote desktop service. So I'll try to reconnect again. I hope that doesn't, it's because I just logged in again, isn't it? I just logged in again. Let's try that again. What a terrible demonstration, Jerry. So I'll let you go home soon. I'll get you to do the lab for this first thing tomorrow morning. Yeah. Try one more time. Correct. That was the other browser tab in my expired session. Yeah. So now here is my Windows server with the agent installed. The tray icon is hidden. I can't open the XDR agent console. Yeah. If I wanted to get that back, I have to go and update my agent settings profile, find the user interface settings, use the default to make the tray icon visible, use the default so that the XDR agent console will be enabled. Yeah. I'll put the live terminal notifications back on as well. Save that. And next time my agent performs a check-in, we could try another method for doing a check-in. Yeah, we have SciTool. I don't have the agent console, but I do have SciTool. I know about it. I can do a SciTool check-in command. So next time it's not in my path. Why isn't SciTool in my path anymore? SciTool. I'm really surprised. Here's a quick way, yeah? Back on the XDR management console, I'll find my endpoint. and I'm going to force it to do a check-in, perform a heartbeat, see if that helps. Yeah, I'm not the user of that workstation or server. I'll trigger it from Cortex XDR, and maybe what we'll find is when we look back at after the check-in completes, I don't know why Cytle wasn't running for me. It is in my path. Yeah, I'm not sure why, but we're hoping that after the check-in, that the XDR agent icon becomes visible again, yeah, after it completes. Try it again. I'm going to do a force check-in on it. Yep. Check-in performed successfully. Back on the agent. Sometimes it'll take a few seconds, but yeah, that tray icon will appear, and then we'll be able to get to the XDR agent console after that check-in completes. But I won't wait on that, yeah? All right, so here's the agent security settings in the agent settings profile. The whole 262 class, starting on Thursday, is to learn about the features of the XDR Pro license. So on Thursday, we will enable XDR Pro endpoints. And when we do enable XDR Pro endpoints, then it will monitor and collect enhanced endpoint data. Every 5 minutes, we send a log of the activity on the agent. And by default, we enable host insights for the agent because you've turned on Pro. We can only provide support for our add-ons if Pro is enabled. If Pro is disabled, I can't provide add-on support like host insights or forensics. Yeah, so this is where we enable Pro. It's just a change to the agent settings, not a change to the code. So there are two areas where we configure agent settings. There's global and there's specific agent settings. To configure our global settings, like the global uninstall password, the minor content updates to enable that, how we do agent upgrades, that's under settings, configurations, general, and the agent configuration we've seen before. We have specific settings in the agent settings profile. Yeah, the settings in the agent settings profile will override the global settings. So if I have an uninstall password in my agent settings profile, I'm not using the global. So did my tray icon become visible again? I hope so. It's been long enough. Oh, wow. What is going on? So let me go back to my endpoint list. We'll troubleshoot this. I found the correct endpoint. Is it using my policy rule? Yes, it's using my policy rule. Which profiles are used in my policy rule? So endpoint data, view the endpoint policy, and I'm seeing my agent settings profile and what the user interface settings are. I've set them back to use default. I'm really not sure why that should be the case for the VM. Where is it? It's very strange. I've never seen this before. So I'm going to force it to do a check-in one more time. I shouldn't have to, but I'll try. Force check-in, please make this work. I'm trying to do a good lab demonstration. Check-in performed successfully. Still takes a few seconds for the check-in to complete. It's really strange. It's actually really strange. Should appear. Never seen that before. Yeah. And yeah, let's do that. Ah, wrong directory. It's program files 86. Wrong directory. So I won't dig around that way, but why on earth? Why is it not showing? Who's got any ideas? I've never seen this before. Yeah. Please work. Anyway, while that's happening, it should do it all by itself. I shouldn't need to force it. Yeah. Every check-in performed by the agent, which is connected, it should. I was on the wrong agent. It's my excuse anyway. All right. And the other thing I'll show you before we end up for the day, yeah, and hopefully come back and see the proof there that my tray icon becomes visible. We also have the restrictions profile. So the restrictions profile enables you to configure additional restrictions on the agent that are not enforced by default. So for example, these are the different sections in a restrictions profile. So you can limit executions to prevent potentially malicious executions, malware. We have a section on executable files. Do you want to block executable files from running in well-known local directories or network drives for that matter? Yeah, that can prevent drive-by downloads. Where a user downloads into their downloads directory, they then run it. Do you want to prevent executables from running from untrusted network locations, from network drives? Or removable media files? Do you want to prevent executables from running on a USB attached device, which can prevent things like candy drops? Or on optical drive files like CD-ROMs and Blu-rays? And we also have a section called Custom Prevention Rules that we'll learn about in the 262 class. Just a few slides left, so don't worry if I do a bit more demo. Yeah, but I'm going to create a new restrictions profile for my, just to attach that to my policy rule. And the kind of settings we have in the restrictions profile. Restrictions profile 01. And we don't, by default, we are not restricting file execution to predefined locations. It's disabled by default. So if I do want to block the users from being able to run an executable from a certain location, I put into block mode. I can use notify, which allows the executable and will notify the user and send the alert to XDR. Or I can use report, which allows the executable to run, doesn't notify the user, but does send the alert to XDR. Or I can disable that protection, which is the default. So I want to block executables from running from any files and folders in my block list. There's nothing in my block list. There's nothing in my allow list. So in my block list, and you can use wildcards, you can use Windows environment variables like %user profile % to represent the home directory, /downloads, /*. Yeah, I don't allow any executable from the downloads directory, wherever the home directory is. Add that. I want to add additional restrictions, not from the temp directory either. Yeah, that kind of thing. And add that too. So once you've enforced those restrictions, of course, you could apply it to a policy rule. But while I'm here, that's just the executable file section. We then have network location files to restrict access to all network locations to run executables, except from trusted ones that you specify. That's disabled. What about removable media files? Yeah, USB attachments. We're not restricting file execution launched from external drives. That's disabled. You could configure it in block mode to block executables from removable media, yeah, from running, or again, report or notify. Optical drive files. And custom prevention rules we'll go through in the 262 class. I'll save some really good bits afterwards. I'll create that restrictions profile. All I should need to do is attach it to my policy rule so that in theory, next time my agent does a check-in, it will also use not just my own agent settings profile, it will also use my restrictions profile. So I'm going to edit my policy rule. It's already got my agent settings profile. Now I'll attach not the default restrictions, but the 6718 restrictions. Sometimes it works, the filter. Most often it doesn't. There it is. Yep. And then go through step 2. It'll remember the previous targeting that you used for the policy rule. So I don't need to change it. Next, again, to confirm with a summary. Yes, I've got all the right profiles applied now, targeted correctly to endpoints in my static group, and then done. And it's still not saved until I choose whether I want to reorder and then save. Yeah. So that's the save operation. I'm really hoping that by now my tray icon, wow, what is going on? It's really, really strange. That seems to be a bug of some kind, right? Yeah. If that was important, I'd be straight on to opening a support case. I'd stop my agent. I can't run Cytal to stop my agent. I'd have to find where Cytal is. I could do a couple of other things to stop my agent and restart it and force it to check in that way, or Cytal check in. But for some reason, I can't explain what's going on there, yeah? It's never happened in any of my demos before. That's my excuse. All right. So very important for me to point out, in a section like we have in the restrictions profile, executable files. Just a few slides left, yeah? Do we want to restrict file execution to predefined locations? No, it's disabled. Disabled means we're allowing file execution from those locations. We will not notify the user. We will not send an alert to Cortex XDR. So disabled means we're not doing the protection. If we want to enforce the protection, we have block. Yeah, so if we are blocking files in the blacklist, yeah, anything in my downloads directory, the execution of files in that block list, yeah, the agent will block the execution, will notify the user and send the report to XDR. The other options I showed you, notify allows the executable to run and will notify the user and send the alert to XDR, whereas report allows the executable but does not notify the user. It does send the alert to XDR. Yeah. So maybe, I'm not sure if my agent's done a check-in at this stage, but I'm going to try. Maybe I'm still able to run an executable from my downloads directory. Remember, we have your personal. What has happened to my machine? My folder's empty. Malware directory. What's happened to my machine? I think I've logged on to the wrong host. I think I've logged on to the wrong pod. That's what it is. I've logged on to the wrong pod. Yeah, I've logged on to the wrong pod. That's what the problem has been, everyone. So if we go back to PLA, so yeah, so everything is working properly, but I logged on to the wrong Windows VM, and that Windows VM does not have our agent installed, yeah? So if I go back to close this one off, 18 was wrong. If I go back to the lab login page, I will log off as number 18, because the first time I actually installed onto the pod number 19. Again, I got confused between numbers in different courses. I'm so sorry. So my demonstration will work fine if I log on to the right pod and access the right Windows VM that actually has the agent installed. It took me a while to get there. Yeah. And this time, when we connect to my Windows server, that's the Linux server. And this time when we connect to the Windows server, yeah, well, the tray icon is back, yeah? The tray icon is back. You didn't see it really when it was hidden. But to prove my restrictions, if I tried to run an executable from the downloads directory before this would have run, now we're in, really not having a great day for my demos. That should have been blocked, an executable running from the downloads directory. So I now need to troubleshoot, yeah? I now need to troubleshoot. So briefly again, if I look at 6718 WinPoint, yeah, endpoint data, view the endpoint policy. Am I enforcing that restriction in the restrictions profile? I've got the right restrictions profile. And are we in block mode? Yes. And if you mistype, it won't syntax check for you. So I'm now going to check %user profile %. /downloads / is correct. It is actually correct. Yeah. Shouldn't need to. This will happen all by itself. More endpoints now. That's great. When was the last check-in? Let's confirm. Sometimes this will help you as well. If we open the agent console, my local time is 8:45 a.m. and the last check-in was 8:45 a.m. So maybe it's got that setting from the restrictions profile. And now, when we try to run an executable from the downloads directory, We're in block mode, so disallowing the behavior, and sent the alert to Cortex XDR. Yeah, it won't be a high severity alert. If we look in the alerts table from the incidents page, I'll clear my filter. And probably the most recent alert just came from my 6718 win point. It's a low severity alert. Execution from a restricted folder. Yeah. Action was prevented and blocked by the agent. All right. So we got there eventually. Thank you for your patience. But the troubleshooting is good as well. Yeah. So please be able to understand what the difference is between these action modes. Block is blocking the behavior. Disable is disabling the protection versus notify and report. If you have questions, please ask. Yeah. I won't keep you long. And you can do the lab first thing tomorrow morning. We have the section on network location files to restrict executables from running from all locations except network locations in the allow list. Disabled also removable media file, executables running from removable media files or running from optical drive files. That's disabled. It's up to you to put into block mode. All right. So yeah, thank you for your patience in my demonstration. I apologize about logging into the wrong pod and getting a bit confused myself. And I maybe confused you as well. You can see the product works great. Yeah. It should be really fast, right? It should be super fast. In fact, to the extent that if we go and change my prevention profile, my agent settings profile, still my last filter, so that won't take long. And again, just to prove it, change the user interface settings, make the tray icon hidden, make the XDR agent console disabled, save that, wait for the endpoint to do its check-in, or force it so I can let you go home quickly. So I'm going to Alt right click, endpoint control, and force a check-in, a full cycle heartbeat. Make sure it gets the policy update. Yeah. If the check-in completes quickly, so 8:47. So just wait for that check-in to complete. And what happened? The XDR agent console disappeared. The tray icon became invisible. Yeah. So that's as fast as it usually is. I wanted to make sure you understood that because my demonstration wasn't the best because I got confused and logged into the wrong pod number. Yeah. So hopefully you understand now the relationship between our profiles and policy rules, how to configure some of the settings in the agent settings profile, the restrictions profile. If you'd like to do the first part of the lab, you can, but I'll give you about half an hour tomorrow morning to complete this lab. That's what I usually do. Yeah. It's great that we got through this module today, but yeah, we can start it first thing in the morning. It looks like you are morning people. Most people were joined before 9 a.m. Singapore. So if you'd like to rejoin early tomorrow, yeah, I'll have the session open early. You can begin the lab there, but again, it'll be lab time until 9:30 a.m. Singapore, so we can complete the next coming lab to do the kind of things I just demonstrated, yeah? Configure your agent settings profile, create a Windows policy rule, and then configure the restrictions profile and attach it to your policy rule. Any questions about anything we covered today before I let you go? Did you learn anything today? Was it the first time some of you may have seen Cortex XDR? Yes. Okay. I'm hoping you've both learned and great. Okay. I'm glad. Yeah. So yeah, from tomorrow we start, from this stage of the course, now that we've been through the user interface basics, it all gets much more interesting. Yeah. To understand how XDR works. So again, I'll have a very good night. And I'll see you first thing tomorrow morning. We will begin module 5 at 9:30 a.m. So your mission is to complete these 2 lab activities up to the end of lab 4.2, if anyone's behind, by 9:30 a.m. tomorrow morning. Yeah. Half an hour should be enough time to do these activities. But if you want to start early, the session, I will make sure the Zoom session, I'm always at least 15 minutes early. You're welcome to join. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you for your attendance. I'll see you tomorrow morning.
Thank you, Jerry.
My pleasure, Thomas. Good to hear your voice. You've all been so quiet for me. I'm not sure if you're enjoying. I'm hoping you're enjoying, everyone. Yeah.
Yes, I
Pleasure.
do. Yes, I do.
Great. Thank you very much. And Kent, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. I know you've been working hard.
Yes,
Jackson, thank you for your message.
thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Jack. You have a very good night. Enjoy your dinner and your families, and I'll see you at 9 a.m. Singapore tomorrow morning. Thanks very much, Joseph. Both Josephs. Thank you. And you can stay. I'm not trying to get rid of you early. If anyone wants help to catch up on any of the lab steps, you're welcome to stay. I'm not ending the session yet. But if you do want to drop off, no problem. Yeah, I've given you the okay to drop off as well. All right. Good night. Thank you, Sammy. Thank you, Carter.